What's going on, everybody? This is Brian Mazique, aka Unique Mazique, the hardest working man in sports and gaming. And I'm talking about Carmelo Anthony and Jimmy Butler today. So if you are familiar with me, then you know I'm not necessarily the biggest Jimmy Butler fan, but I got to give credit where credit is due. Jimmy has stepped up in his two games with the 76ers, even though they lost the first one, and I think won the last two. But he stepped up and he has played big in a variety of facets of the game. And he's done this under a pretty good deal of pressure. When you pretty much force your way out from one team to another, there's even bigger microscope on you than normal. If you're an NBA player, especially an upper echelon NBA player, there's a huge spotlight on you. But when you force a trade, obviously there's going to be an even bigger spotlight. And he has come up big. Like, in Saturday night's game, the 76ers taking on Charlotte Hornets on the road. And I'm talking about Kemba Walker was in a different type of zone. 60 points he put on the 76ers. And towards the end of the second half, they switched Jimmy on him because Jimmy's their best on-ball defender. And once they switched Jimmy on him, he was still quite honestly, he was still lighting the Sixers up. But a key defensive stop down the stretch, Jimmy got a great block shot on Kemba. And not only did he block the shot, but he was able to save it and flip it back inbounds to start a 76ers possession. That was huge. But the biggest thing he did was he knocked down a three, the game winner, to win the game in overtime, to send the Hornets home without a victory, despite 60 points from Kemba Walker. Like I said, I got to give credit where credit is due. Jimmy really balled out. And if they can continue to function the way they are, the 76ers are going to be fine with Butler. But I also think that the Timberwolves are better off without Jimmy. If you pay attention to what's going on, the Timberwolves are 3-0 without Jimmy Butler, and they haven't beaten bad teams in that time frame. So Jeff Teague has come back, and Rose has gone back to the bench, which I think is the best long-term spot for him with this team, from a body preservation standpoint and from an overall depth standpoint. He still comes in, gets buckets. If he's shooting well or doing well, he can be on the floor at the end of the game. You can go with both him and Teague if you like and put him off the ball. Either way, but that is the best way to use him. Karl Anthony Towns has been playing like a man possessed since Butler was gone. And while Karl took the high road, and I mentioned this in another video, while he took the high road through the majority of this issue, you got to believe that as a human being, he still was kind of bubbling on the inside and couldn't wait to get an opportunity to show that a lot of that stuff that Jimmy said wasn't true, or to show that, whatever Jimmy said, I'm not going to be those things anymore, even if I have been in the past. And I think that he's done that with the exception of some high turnovers. But the bottom line is the Timberwolves are 3-0. And so now I believe the Sixers are 2-1 without, with Jimmy, after Jimmy has joined them. So to me, it's clear both teams seem to be moving in the right direction. Even Andrew Wiggins looks more engaged and more aggressive. And Wiggins is never going to be a great defender, right? He's never going to be a lockdown guy. But I think he's applying himself more defensively. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that he's getting more shots now than he was getting when Jimmy was there. And you may not like that, but some players, that's just the way they function. They become more engaged overall on both ends of the floor when they're getting their touches, especially if they're an offensively talented player like Andrew Wiggins. So he's never going to be a perfect player, never going to be a guy who's going to look up and say, hey, now that dude probably is worth #1 pick, even though he's had solid numbers. It's just something about him from an engagement standpoint that people are never going to give him that, they're never really going to give him that love. Now, the other big move, so to speak, in the NBA or in the recent NBA news is Carmelo Anthony leaving the Houston Rockets, and we're pretty much waiting to see which team, if any team, is going to pick him up. Now, we've had on At Me Bro, and I've had some talks here, some rants about Melo and what I think he should do and that, so and so and so forth. But I think it's pretty clear. The Rockets are just I don't know why this is the case. I don't know if anybody can say definitively, point to all of the reasons why. But the Rockets are just a better team without Melo. They just are. I mean, if you look at the team and what they've done since he left, I mean, they're currently on a 4-game winning streak. They have crept into the 8th spot in the Western Conference, which I believe everybody knows or believes that, or at least thought originally that they would be much higher than that. I mean, and even if you look, I mean, obviously one of the biggest things you talk about when you talk about Melo and what the team hasn't done or whatever is their defense. Well, they've held teams under 100 points in 2 of the last 4 games that they played. And you might say, well, how can one guy who's not even starting most of the games have that much of a impact, especially a negative impact on a team overall? Well, I think a lot of it has to do with defense is often contagious, right? And demeanor and approach are often contagious. And because Melo just has a certain way of going about business in terms of in terms of on the court. He's a very low effort defender, and he's a very low effort player off the ball. And that's because for the most of his career, he's been able to lean on just being that isolation scorer who going one-on-one more times than not, he's going to get a bucket or you're going to foul him. And today's NBA doesn't function that way, and definitely the Rockets offense don't function that way because only the point guard or the primary ball handler is the guy who generally gets to play that way in their offense. And Melo just could not adjust, and he doesn't do enough well outside of that to make him an effective player for the Rockets. The other thing is, because of that and because of his status of who he is and because of the weight and the respect that he has of players, I do think he could be very, very influential. And in this way, he can be very much of a negative impact on our team. And I think we're seeing some evidence of that with the way that they're playing now that he's not there. Now, obviously, it's early, and no one's saying that everything that ailed the Rockets early in the season has been fixed. But it sure looks like Melo leaving the Rockets or the Rockets deciding to part ways with Melo has been a case of addition by subtraction. And sometimes that can happen. I think we're seeing the same thing with the Timberwolves because the Wolves didn't get anybody back from the 76ers who is, I mean, Covington, don't get me wrong. Covington's presence for the Wolves is not something that you can totally dismiss. He's a good spot-up shooter, and he is an outstanding defender. So the defensive aspect that Butler played by taking on the other team's best offensive player, Covington's still able to do that. The difference is he doesn't need the same amount of shots that Butler gets. He's not a ball stopper the way Butler is. So if you look at that, you're getting because really, if you really look at the Wolves didn't need a ton of scoring. They really didn't. They did need the defense that Butler delivered, but they didn't necessarily need the negative impact on the offense or the negative impact on the team psyche. So now Covington's playing that same type of lockdown defense, and he's playing off of guys like Towns. He's playing off of T. He's playing off of Rose. He's playing off of Wiggins, as opposed to being an offensive presence that makes everybody play off of him. And is he, one-to-one comparison to Butler? Is he as good? No, but that doesn't mean that he's not a better fit for the Timberwolves. And I think that that's what we're seeing. So I think it's pretty interesting how these two really big name, well-respected players can leave teams and those teams can appear to be better without them. But then in Butler's case, essentially maybe he's just found a better fit for what he does with the 76ers. I think time's going to tell. as we look at the season over the next few weeks. Also, I'm excited to see what other trades might come through. But that's all that I got for you today. If you enjoy these basketball conversations, and I've been saying this for the past 2, 3, 4 days, maybe a little bit longer, make sure you hit that like button. It's important. And also, if you want to, if this is your first time seeing a video from me, this is what I do for the most part. We'll mix in some NBA 2K in there as well, and some just basketball, other basketball related stuff. But hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notifications as well. I appreciate you watching as always. God bless. Peace.